Welcome aboard the dopamine train, where our ADHD-powered locomotive stops at every shiny thought along the tracks. I'm Obee Won, and with my co-host Rome, we explore various topics and see where the conversation train takes us.
Okay, so go ahead.
All right. Welcome back to the Dopamine Train, episode 11, where Rome and Obee Won are going to be talking about goal setting and how to achieve your goals. I know Rome has done a lot of research for this. I'm coming off of personal experiences in terms of my coaching and all that stuff. So let's just dive in.
Sounds good. I was super stoked when you mentioned that you wanted to discuss this topic. I think I immediately pulled up my notepad and started jotting things down, because anything that has to do with, like, I guess self-improvement stuff is something I'm a fan of, and just trying to optimize myself as a human being as much as possible. It's something I take great pleasure in. So I guess the first part of this conversation, based on the title that we initially came up with, well, the whole thing is how to formulate goals and achieve them. So the first part would be how to formulate them. So I obviously have a bunch of thoughts on this, but I'd love to hear you start off if you'd like, or, I could just run down the bullets, whatever you'd like, Obee Won.
I think we should start off, well, what is a goal? There's basically what you're trying to achieve at the end of the day by a bunch of little tasks. And so a lot of my work revolves around SMART goals, but sometimes I can find them a little bit not challenging per se, but hard to put that on the individual in a sense, like building a SMART goal out for yourself. But for our audience, do you know what a SMART goal is, Rome, or no?
I was just going to ask you what that means.
Okay. Let me pull up the acronym.
I figured it was some specific type of goal, or maybe something that you came up with in your workplace, but yeah, no, I'm curious to know what it is.
It's very big in the business world. So S stands for specific, M stands for measurable, A stands for achievable, R stands for relevant, and then T is time bound. And so when you're building out the goal, make it specific, make sure that it's measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And that's when you're building out these goals. So we'll dive into an example. I want to be healthier or want to lose weight. That's specific. How are we measuring it? By loss of weight or better habits, or in a sense, what are your measures of success? Is it achievable? Meaning having that honest conversation with yourself of, can I actually do this? Relevant depends on the definition you're going for relevant. Health, I think, is always relevant, and time bound is within how long are you going to do this? What is the timeline for that goal? And so, for instance, if we're thinking about losing or being healthier, going to the gym, the measures would be actually going and doing the thing and then recording it, in a sense, meaning like in a notebook or keeping count, in a sense. And then you have your little check-ins each month of like how you're doing with the goal. And it's okay if you not necessarily backtrack, but you're not hitting it, but then coming back and being tenacious and going towards it again. And so that's like what most of my work concerns is a SMART goal. And that's what I work on with my students a lot of the time is, what are we trying to achieve, and is it realistic? Because it's kind of like we run into those problems of, I'm trying to think of a good example. I want to make 80K in 2 years. So is that realistic? Depends, right? And so it's coming back to what we talked about in a previous contest. What self work have you done so that you can be set up for success in a sense? But I kind of just rambled on a little bit.
That you hit on some really great points there, especially, well, one that stood out obviously was being realistic about the goals. And then another, which is a point that I want to talk about later, is how even if you experience some kind of setback, how you can keep going despite that and inconsistency. And what one thing that kind of struck me was when you described the acronym of what all those things mean, that was actually like 4 of the 5 things that I wrote down. So I'm excited to, and that was with no prior knowledge of it. So I'm excited to kind of expand on that further.
Yeah. It's, I will say with the SMART goals, it's not a one size fits all. It's just a tool at the end of the day. And that's where I want to be very mindful of that. It may not work for you, and that's okay. But I will say there are key elements within SMART goals that are helpful. For instance, like the concept of measurable is, I think, very important, because you want that what keeps you in the game in a sense is having measures of success, of like, what does success mean to you? What does success mean to this goal? And then the achievable part is being mentally ready to accept that it's going to happen. It's kind of like visualizing what's going to happen next and achieving it. And so, and then the time bound thing part is like establishing a timeline. So I would say, like, if you're going to goal set, make sure that it's achievable. It's not, what's the word I'm looking for? Achievable.
It's not too grandiose.
Not too grandiose. You can measure it, and then you have a time-bound part to it by when. It's kind of like how with us when we were building out this podcast, what date do we need this by? And for some of aspects of building out our podcast, when we were like building out album artwork a little bit, by not setting dates with others, it kind of got pushed in a sense. And so now we're in a better setting for that and working with different partners on that now. And because we've set dates of when things need to get done by, things are happening. And for us, even for our podcast, is like doing it every Sunday. And if there's not, it's because of a decent reason. But yeah.
But we always come back to it. Yeah, when you messaged me saying, are we gonna record this weekend? I just looked at my calendar and said, "There's no reason we shouldn't." So we got to do it. Mm-hmm. And that is such a huge thing. I think people overlook is the not so exciting minutia of what you have to do. Like I think people don't distinguish between an idea that they have or a dream that they have that may have just popped into their head in that moment and they were excited to share it. That's a whole different thing from something you're actually going to do. It's one thing to say, hey, it'd be great to make a podcast and we could talk about this and we could talk about that. But the operative word in what I just said is could. Everything is just hypothetical. But until you say, okay, we're meeting up on the 5th, none of that is real. The 5th is a real day that will come up. And making that distinction is incredibly important. And I didn't really get taught that. I had to figure that out because people would say it to me. I have to give a huge thanks to a director I work with, Quinn. We don't really work together so much anymore. But one of the things that really kept me on track when it came to producing my film was the minutia of actionable dates, to-do lists of props and items and budgetary things that needed to be considered. That was all grounded in reality and was extricated from that creative space that I imagine a lot of artists get stuck in. It's nice to think about cool things and how they're going to come to fruition, but at some point it's got to be just boring work. Not all of it is boring, but a lot of it kind of is. So that's one thing to keep in mind. I think for me, when it comes to formulating goals, I have 3 things that I'm really aiming for. And does it bring me joy, and does it make me feel useful and connected? So now, just to clarify, these are usually large overarching goals. I may not feel joy folding my laundry, but it's something that needs to be done. But if I'm trying to figure out what journey I want to go on, those are the three things I try to aim for, because in my opinion, there's a lot of reasons to kind of be aimless. Some people are guided by their faith. Others have the expectations of family members that they're willing to go along with, or they think they have to go along with. And those are the guardrails that they try to follow. But if you're just starting from nothing and you have no idea what to aim for, I would say if it brings you joy, makes you feel useful, and makes you feel connected with other people, those are important attributes. And the reason why those are important, I mean, the joy should be obvious. If you really like something, then probably something to go towards. That doesn't necessarily apply to anything. There's lots of things that people like that aren't good for them. But I guess that's where the other elements come in. So feeling useful, I found, is counterintuitive, but it's really important. It's one thing for me to sit all day and play video games because I think playing games are fun, but they don't make me feel useful. They just make me feel like I'm, sometimes having a good time, but other times really wasting my time. And there are people who are very wealthy and can afford to do whatever thing makes them feel joy, but they're lacking that sense of feeling useful. And I should clarify that by useful, I mean like you're contributing to something bigger than yourself. Like you're giving back to the greater good of mankind, your family, whoever, maybe just one individual. Like that, doing honest work, I think, is one of the secrets to actually feeling good about yourself on a regular basis. And then the last part of that is being connected, because human beings are an organism that require relationship with one another in order to function properly. I know there are people who operate really well on their own and are mavericks, or lone wolves, as we like to say. I feel like sometimes with my editing work and with learning how to run a podcast, I'm kind of a lone wolf, but I think the fact that this serves the greater good of us being able to collaborate together when we're live, and it being able to reach the ears of people who might want to listen, is what makes it worth it. It's both useful and connected, and just the process brings me joy. So that's one way of deciding how to choose a goal, because I might say I'd rather play video games than record a podcast, because it's like low effort and relatively easy to just start doing. But the podcast fills all those buckets. So that's why it's better to opt for that choice. And a simplified way of breaking all that down is just the essentialist idea of saying hell yes. You only have so much time during the day, during your life, to do things. Like I'll never get to do everything. I would love to try everything, but I don't have that time.
Right.
And so I have to distinguish and choose things that I really want to do and focus in on those, because I feel like that'll actually have the greatest net positive outcome for everyone at large.
Exactly.
There's more there, but I've yapped enough on that account.
No, you're good. It's a couple things I jotted down is that you mentioned, like it's fun to be in that creative space when you're brainstorming. What I work on with students and with myself is taking your imagination to reality and making it's like writing down, in a sense, what would it take to achieve this? And just like brainstorming that way, right? Writing down all those little things and then putting them into a timeline of, all right, these actions by these dates. And that's a good start. The big thing I will say, I think that we need to address with goal setting is what happens when you fall astray? What happens when you in a sense, move away from those guardrails that you mentioned. And I think that's where it comes back to the stuff I was mentioning before earlier in our early episodes of you have to do this work on thyself so that you can be in a place of functioning, right? But if you're going to achieve what you want to achieve, I think the biggest thing is, if we're going to do like a step-by-step process, is working on thyself, setting those goals that are attainable within your own sphere of things, and then slowly branch out to those things. Now, granted, it's the classic, what is the priority of priorities today? And that's where I think some people get caught up, is like, well, what should I do first? And what I would say is start small, meaning like a smaller goal, right? One could be, I want to walk for 30 minutes a day. Literally just go walk for 30 minutes a day. See how that feels. Congratulate yourself, pat yourself on the back on whatever is your like reward system for that, and continue to do so. But if you fall off, say like, oh, I didn't walk 30 minutes a day. We're not doing the negative self-talk as woe is you, shame on you, how dare you not do this? And really refuting that with, no, we're human. We have our off days, and sometimes it's needed, and that's okay. Then the next stage is go walk. And the key is, it's like getting back up and doing it again. And that's where I think people get lost in the cycle of negative self-talk is, oh, I didn't achieve it, woe is me. Oh, I didn't achieve it, woe is me. And it becomes sort of like a habitual thing of negativity. Whereas if it takes as much effort to be negative, why not be positive is what I pose to our listeners. Because you are exhausting the same amount of energy to one or the other. And so I was talking a little bit with my friend about this because they give a speech at their church about like the maintenance of a goal and what that takes. And one part that spoke out to me in our conversation was, no matter what happens, choosing to trust that goal is what you need to do. And continuously be mindful of those things that come up for your thoughts and things like that. Because we're choosing at the end of the day how to react to someone or something or a outside stimuli. Whether, granted, choice can be impulsed, right? Say family member died. Stimuli is negativity, which is fine. And I will say that's a okay negative, is to be sad or grieve. But it's when it's festers, when it starts affecting other aspects. As long as you're noticing them and then eventually addressing them, that's what matters, whatever that looks like for you. So I know I've just talked about a bunch, and I'm sure Rome has a bunch of
a lot of great stuff to unpack there. First off, regarding the negative self-talk, that's something I only learned recently, and it's something that I hear and I do and is pretty commonplace in most people's lives, to the point where if you point it out, it's actually kind of odd that you're pointing it out, I think. So
interesting.
So the idea of, you know, you're going through your day and like you bring in, let's say you have a bunch of groceries, bring in a few bags of groceries, and you forget you left the milk in the car and it's been there for an hour. And that's one of the few perishable things you probably should have brought in first. And you go, oh, I'm an idiot. You know, that's such a common thing. Like, oh, that was so stupid of me. Mm-hmm. And on one hand, it's like, well, you know, you made a mistake and at least you're owning up to it in some way, and you're going to go out and get the milk and take care of it. But when you make a habit of doing that, actually, not even if you make a habit of doing it, just the action of saying that about yourself, your brain doesn't know the difference. You're making a negative assessment that is becoming internalized. So
false.
And false. Yeah, exactly. Like your entire existence is not defined by the fact that you forgot the milk in the car one time. It's not
Imagine.
that serious. I mean, that's kind of where some people reach, they look in the
Mhm.
mirror and they're like, we joke about it. Sometimes I have a friend and we joke about this sometimes where it's like, you look in the mirror and something is out of place on your appearance and you're like, oh, it's
Mhm.
over. Life is over.
I can't leave the house today.
Yeah, just like hyperbolic, just total hyperbole, exaggeration of what actually matters and is important. But we do that so casually, and it accumulates over time, and it's something that we have to become conscientious of. And it's a tricky issue too, because I was fortunate to live in a household where my parents were very encouraging for the most part, and that's not everyone's experience. In
Mhm.
fact, I mean, I don't know. It's just my anecdote, but I feel like it's not most people's experience. Like their
Mhm.
parents are being hard on them. It may be with good intentions to achieve, but a lot of it has to do with the parents' insecurity, their own negativity. And one of the most haunting phrases I've ever heard, gosh, I really don't want to ruin it because I don't know it word for word, but I think Freud said it, and it's that children bear the burden of solving the problems that parents never figured out. And
Hmm.
so obviously parents are human beings. They're kind of like big children. You look at politics and everything that takes place, and it's kind of just like a bunch of big kids making decisions with really sophisticated technology. At the end of the day, I mean, if you ever work with kinders or pre-K, you'll see that they're just an accelerated version of how adults operate.
Mhm.
They solve their problems very directly. If they're aggressive, sometimes violently, and it's easy to rein those things in because they're obvious. But adults learn how to hide that stuff. I'm getting kind of beside the point, but basically, if your parents operate in a certain way that tends to tilt towards negativity, then children will naturalize that behavior as, well, this is simply the way things are. Like it's not meant to be positive. And unlearning that is really difficult if you don't have a gauge by which to learn it. In the same way that in sports, if you don't know what you don't know, how are you going to improve? Unless it just kind of hits you in the face. So that's a really challenging thing. And hopefully if
Right.
someone is listening to this and they are of the mindset, they realize how negative they are, then they can start to take those steps to turn things around, because it is a really hard thing. It's
Mhm.
doesn't seem like it's a big deal. In fact, negativity or problem seeking or noticing the flaws in things is a human trait that's designed to avoid problems, or to solve problems, I should say.
Right.
So,
I
you know,
do want to comment on a couple things. I think one I'll go for the latter versus the first. So I want to touch back on the parents and the socialization part. But at this moment, for those who are listening who are battling negativity in their lives, one simple strategy that you can employ is this, right?
employ,
We'll
you
take
mean?
employ or employ.
Implore is like to want something from someone. Employ
Oh,
is to use something.
and see. Oh, so employ then.
See, I'm not going to let you get away with them anymore. I'm going to call them
My dyslexia.
That's all good. All good.
Yeah, this is funny. I my brain says one thing and does another, right? Mouth does another thing.
But me, I will sometimes switch the position of letters. So I totally understand.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think it's part of being human, right?
exactly.
So going back to your example that you mentioned earlier about leaving the milk in the car over an hour. So one strategy you can employ, instead of saying, I'm an idiot, as soon as your brain says that, saying, no, I'm not an idiot. I am just forgetful at times, and that's part of me being a human being.
Yeah, you just made
Or
a mistake.
it's like, but literally, as soon as it pops up, refuting it, that's like, to me, the biggest key in life is just do it now, meaning just refute it now. Because
I
again,
see. I see.
and what can happen is, like, right, you keep entertaining those thoughts, and then it just becomes exhausting. Everyone's tired of just everything. And so then what happens is that, sorry, my screen was about to go blank and I was like freaking out for a second.
Oh, good.
Totally lost it, but it's fine. Basically, what can happen is we're drowning. You can either drown in negativity or positivity. It's your choice at the end of the day, which route to choose. And if you falter, not getting self-shame and realizing it's part of the human experience and getting back up. Back to the point of...
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Do you have any specific goals that are the overarching goals? Like if we were to use video game terms, like do you have any goals that are the main quest of your life?
I've been doing some self-discovery as of late to do that thing in a sense. Meaning I reflected this past year, as most people do at the end of the year, of like where I am, where am I going, what am I doing? And I realized for a very long time that I was kind of detached from it and was really just going with the flow. I didn't have a really set goal in mind. So what I've been doing is journaling, and that's been helpful for myself in terms of setting goals for the day. So I've been using this one journal. It's called the 5-Minute Journal. I highly recommend for anyone who's goal setting or just trying to change their mindset daily. So the way the journal is designed is you have things that you write 3 things that you're grateful for today. So the things I wrote down today was I'm grateful for my friend Rome. I am grateful for my significant other, and I'm grateful for my body in a sense. And that's what I wrote down today. The next section is what would make today great. And that's where you can put down some things. For me, it's to organize a little bit my house because there's just ADHD piles everywhere. That would make my day great and put my mind at ease for the week. The other thing was to do physical activity for at least 30 minutes today. And then the last thing was I forgot what it was. But anyway, you kind of getting the point. And then the last part is the daily affirmation. And that's where I wrote, I am patient and kind. And I also wrote, I am tenacious in finishing a task. And that's what I wrote down for today. And it's literally 2 minutes as soon as I wake up. And I've been doing that the last 7-ish days. And I found it very helpful in the fact of getting my mind set for the day of what I'm trying to achieve. And then at the end of the day, you reflect on what good things happened today and what did you learn. And that's the whole journal. That's the whole setup. And I've found it very helpful and has really set my mind in terms of achieving in a positive mindset. It's basically kind of like what I was doing before is some people call it manifesting. I would call it, in a sense, being grateful and putting out into the universe and writing down what you're trying to achieve, and you're more likely to achieve it because you wrote it down in a sense. Instead of having it in this creativity brainstorm, we're putting it down to words and making it sound achievable. So that's what I've been doing as of late. My goals have been, I want to do those little goals for the larger goals, in a sense. For me, the other goal would be to be more, expand my skill set in terms of coaching skills and advising skills is probably my biggest goal for this year. And how to then also disseminate information for those things to the lowest common denominator so it's understandable by all. But
Those are
They,
some great goals you mentioned, especially the micro goals. So I like that you included your body as one of the things that you're grateful for. I
mm-hmm,
think that's a really underrated thing that people don't consider because, as we're going through life, you only get this one vessel,
mm-hmm,
and there's a lot of ideas that the mind, the body, the spirit, what these things are all separate. And I firmly believe that they're all deeply connected. I mean, my personality on a day to day basis, my thought process is significantly affected by how I treat my body. If it got enough rest, if it ate properly, not only do those things affect performance, reaction time, whatever, but just my mood. I mean,
mm-hmm.
it would be a very different call right now between you and I if I got 2 hours of sleep and I was all grouchy versus if I got 8. And
Right.
and we think, well, the body is weak or it's suffering through something and you have to be strong in mind. It's like, well, your mind is not going to be strong necessarily if you're not taking care of all the other organs that you have to operate with. In fact, a lot of times the mind is the thing that gets the rest of them into trouble. Your
Mm-hmm.
heart wants certain things. Like if you don't want to eat food that is going to make your heart work especially hard, or lots of sugar,
Mm-hmm.
or your arteries, but your brain wants to eat that food because it tastes good, because
Mm-hmm.
it's gratifying. It produces dopamine, or I'm not sure if that's dopamine or serotonin, probably some combination of the two.
Right.
But your brain will oftentimes get you into trouble. So I think all those things are deeply connected in a way that people might underestimate. The other thing that you said that I thought was really important was the 30 minutes of exercise, because going along with the idea of the body, it's surprising how many times we'll fall into a deep rut
Mm-hmm.
emotionally, or be going through an issue, and as soon as you go out for a run, then it's just like not that big of a deal. I know for me, when I go on an audition, or if I'm playing paintball, anything that makes me slightly nervous in any way, taking a cold shower always helps, because to me, the
Hmm.
cold shower is less comfortable, more stressful than either of those things. So, in a way,
Hmm.
playing beach volleyball makes you better at playing indoor because the sand is harder. Taking a cold shower is way harder than standing in front of, a couple of other human beings who are judging your performance. So,
That's interesting. Part of me is like, do you want to come to Rochester and experience the 20-degree weather we're experiencing? And
oh
then it was
God, I don't think I could live in that perpetually. No, definitely not. If it's 1 minute, I mean, this morning I took a cold shower and I could only do 10 seconds this morning. And I was
Oh,
like,
okay. So I'm when you say cold shower, I'm thinking the whole shower is cold, my friend. So you're hopping in, turning it on, and you're just taking that cold water for however long you can take it, and then you switch it back to warm. Okay. I'm thinking this man is showering, shampooing his hair, all the good stuff, and just like cold tap water.
sometimes, definitely in the summer when I feel confident, I can do a 5 minute shower on the maximum cold setting. But
Woof.
most of the time it's normal shower temperature, or warm. I prefer hot showers. I like warm showers. And then the last minute is 30. It's 30 seconds of the normal shower head, and then 30 seconds of the I don't know what do you call it, but like the one that you can hold, the one in your hand. So, there's like
Wand.
the two. Yeah, the wand. Thank you. So 30 seconds of each, so that I can get a minute of the cold water, because that's definitely more than I would like to be in there.
For
But
sure.
during the summer, sometimes that's like 3 minutes of a cold shower, which is great because one, you don't need to, I mean, you're warmed up when you get out, and two, you spend less time under the water.
True, and especially, does California still have the drought restrictions, meaning you can only like use water for a certain amount of time each day? I don't know if that's still a
I
thing or not.
don't, no, not.
Not to your knowledge.
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay. What good, but also like, damn. it so California, if our listeners don't know, water is a very precious resource, and
That Rome is wasting regularly.
the Rome is wasting regularly. No. And so that's where I was just curious on that fact, because water is a big thing for life, and it's very can be very commoditized in California in terms of regulations and all that stuff. Like LA, I always think of LA as the city sometimes that shouldn't exist because there's no natural water stores to it. There is a thing called the California Aqueduct that provides water from the Colorado River. If you guys want to pull up a map and see how far that distance is to LA.
Hey, we didn't come up with it. The Romans did.
No, Romans, the aqueduct. Fair enough, but at the same, it's kind of like the humanity thing of like, just because you could do it doesn't mean you should do it.
Have you ever seen Mad Max?
Which one?
Fury Road.
Oh, one of my all-time favorite movies. I will never forget that I watched it on my laptop. I opened up a can of beer. And then at the end of the movie, the can was not sipped nor drank or finished. It was completely full still. And so that's where it's like, this had my attention the whole time. Because it's basically just one huge scene for 2.5 hours or however long the movie is. And that's what does it for me. I don't know if it won any awards or anything like that, but it was.
It did. I don't remember what the awards were, but it won a bunch.
Yeah. But what was your point about bringing up the film?
Well, first off, that's got to be in my top two, one of my top two movies. But the reason I thought of it was because water in that movie is called aquacola.
Interesting.
Because it's so precious that it's become this commodity. It's like gold, and the people are fighting over it. Because remember, the first scene of the movie is they open up the pipes and the water starts flowing out, and people have their
the buckets and whatnot.
Yeah, they've got buckets. They've got those little dishes that miners used to find gold, and they're using that to catch water.
Yep.
So yeah, I guess I'm incriminating myself more by saying it.
What is your top movie then? Is it Dune?
It's hard to say. Dune is up there, but I love Scott Pilgrim, Kick-Ass, and Mad Max. Those are in the top 5. I'm not sure what the other two would be.
I never would have guessed.
Oh, I love that movie.
Why Scott Pilgrim? Because is it because of the actors? Is it because of the
just like cheesy teenage relationship stuff with a flair of action movie, and it's got the music is fantastic. It's got that rock vibe to it, that like alternative vibe that as a kid I was really into. So
like My Chemical Romance, Blink 182,
exactly.
Sum 41,
and it's got that video game. It's wrapped up in some video game packaging as well, which I hadn't seen a lot of movies like that at the time that were really good. So
fair enough. If you want to explore that universe a little bit more, I know Netflix has. It's either an anime or a cartoon. I don't know. Those lines have been very blurred in terms of categorization on streaming services, which I'm like, don't understand why, but I get it, I guess. Like Avatar: The Last Airbender is considered like an American anime, but I'm like, but is it the art style or whatnot? Anyway, if you want to view more into that universe, there's a whole series out now for that.
I think while we're on that topic, that actually kind of beautifully illustrates one of the things I want to discuss regarding goals, and that's how you decide what to make a goal. I know at the beginning I mentioned joy, feeling useful and feeling connected, but sometimes that could encompass a lot of different things in different ways. And now my screen went dark. Okay, there we go. So I was thinking about this question and I was like, how do I really narrow down what unique to me should be a goal of mine? And I think a great place to start is deconstruct a memory from your childhood or from the past. It doesn't have to be childhood. It's just that childhood memories tend to be a little bit more raw and open and vulnerable. So sometimes those are useful. There's less baggage that's kind of clouding your idea of that. So choosing a memory and identify the raw components that made it truly special or satisfying to you. So the first memory that popped into my head immediately was it had to be Halloween. I was probably 6 or 7 years old, and I was dressed up as like a vampire, as like Dracula. And it wasn't even really a Dracula costume. I think I just had a cape. And I was standing on my bed and I would like throw the cape in front of my face, like trying to be mysterious or whatever. And I think that memory kind of seared itself into my brain as I really liked villain characters. I liked sort of dark brooding characters and
like anti-hero a little bit
anti-hero too. Exactly. And that's just kind of a fragment. It's a clue, if you will, that will help you identify things you like. I also enjoyed performing or putting on pretending to be something I wasn't. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you can think about the potential ideal that you want to aim for. And I want to be careful with the term ideal, because I don't mean that in the sense of one day you're going to be perfect, because that's not going to happen for anyone, nor should anyone necessarily strive for that. I think it's just a gauge, in the same way the expression of reach. Oh God, what is it? How does it go? Reach for the stars and you'll land on something else nearby.
Oh, that's what I say. Shoot for the stars, and if you hit up the moon, it's pretty damn high up.
Yeah, thank you. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. So if you think about a potential ideal version of yourself that you foresee happening in the future, specify what that peak version looks like and what the attributes of that character would be, and then simply move in that direction. So you have an idea of the past and what you naturally gravitated towards. You have your current version of who you want to become. And if you can find some sort of common ground between those things, that's a pretty well-articulated place to start. I mean, and then you just break down what growth would you have to go through to get to that point? Like what uncomfortable things would you have to experience? And yeah, that will eventually lend itself into the micro goals that we talk about, or that you mentioned earlier. Another great thing is, what individuals do you admire that provide a strong guiding template for the steps that you need to take in your own life? Some of this stuff that I mentioned requires pure introspection and deducing based on your own thoughts and your own sitting down and pondering and meditating, whatever, to figure out those answers. But if there is an individual who's already doing that, then that's also a fantastic gauge. For me, I have two people that are polar opposite. Jesse's not going to like me, and a lot of people wouldn't like this one because he's kind of been kooky in recent days. But back years ago, I would talk a lot about Peterson or Jordan Peterson because so you hear the reaction right there.
Yeah, we've had our discussions offline about him, and I think your point is basically in certain ways because right now in society, masculinity is getting is very malleable, and because of the confusion and the imagination, there's not a reality in a sense for it. You could make that argument, I guess.
There's a lot of grifters out there who are taking advantage of men's insecurity to push them in a certain direction.
And I think currently, his earlier work was good, and I think that's what you're talking about. And then it just kind of went a little haywire and his quest for it seemed like to me a little bit a quest for power and influence.
So the specific thing that I want to cite is a moment in an interview where the interviewer asked him, what is the most important thing, or what is the most beautiful thing to you? And his response was, I think the most beautiful thing I can imagine is a room where a family sits down and there is nothing swept under the rug. There is as much honesty as they can manage between one another, and there is no secret comparison. There is no backhanded remarks. There's no chastising. And that stood out to me, and it connected to another statement, which was, I think it would be more important to be honest than to be comfortable. So after I heard that, I made it my goal going forward. I was like, maybe I can't be honest 100% of the time, but I'm going to be as honest as I can be, to the point where it would make me uncomfortable. In fact, this very example would lends itself to it, because I could very well leave his name out and say someone else who inspires me. But if I'm being truly honest, I'm going to say the person that people disagree with, because it is true to me. So he is one. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, Lady Gaga. The reason I chose her,
Love her,
is because she is ruthlessly true to herself and her creative vision. So it almost kind of falls in line with the other example, in that she, at the possible expense of her career, at the expense of how fans might view her, she decides to make her own thing. It's not about the fame or the success. We say fame while there's an album called The Fame and the Fame Monster, but it is truly about making something that is good, not something that will sell, not something that people will like. It just so happened that those things held true, but something that is truly good. And that's, man, hell yeah. That's what I want to be. I want to be good.
No, it makes sense. I think the reflection I'm having is that Eve, and we might get some heat from this, but it's being true that myself, is I think there's things to be learned about individuals regardless of other actions they have taken. Because again, we're human beings. If we're taking human beings as negative and positive, there's still stuff that can be learned from the positive to push you forward in a sense.
And no one is truly that one-dimensional. Like to put
we like
people
to think
into buckets
that way, but
is,
yep.
Yeah, and that has a lot to do with how we get our news and how social media works. Is I mean, if you want to be successful online, you literally have to niche down into a specific identity in order for that to. It is following the train of thought that you are actually one-dimensional. Right.
Because it's easier to consume, right?
Yeah, easier for people to understand and easier for people to love or demonize.
Right. It's kind of like the example I use in terms of like, what do you think of in terms of like governments? So, for instance, we're going to fall into this meme of thinking about the Roman Empire. But when you think about Rome, what's the first thought that comes to mind? Rome.
Are you talking about myself or actual Rome?
Rome, as in Roman Empire.
Oh, okay. Okay. What's the first thing that comes to mind?
Yep.
Caesar, Colosseum, global domination.
So Caesar comes to mind. We don't think about the Roman Republic.
Yeah.
And so I will even use this again, is when we think of the United States of America, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Sounds goofy, but just freedom.
Freedom. Some would say the president, right? And so
I thought of
it's
a bald eagle, actually.
the craw. Craw, craw. Nah, I wanted a turkey, yo. But that's my point is this is back to like the one-dimensional thinking. The world is like Congress or the Republic in a sense of like we have all these different factions and these people with wonderful characteristics. And that's like how it's sometimes we run into this with history of like we look at it very one-dimensionally as like good or bad, and it's a lot of gray. Everything's a lot of gray. In some philosophical schools, we even think of like only people do good in their eyes, right? Or they've justified why it's good to do so, for better, for worse. And bringing it full circle in a sense of life's not one-dimensional. Every situation has different aspects that may be similar to other situations, but are different situations regardless because of the context. And that's like what, when I was studying history in my undergrad, is the biggest lesson I took from it is everything is not as black and white. Everything is gray. And depending on who is saying what is the context of why it's being written in such a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
It is a really difficult thing to discern and navigate because there's so much nuance, and a lot of that nuance is lost in translation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, man, I just think of the crazy historical events that happened. You know, Napoleon, for example, is one of these characters that's kind of always been he's revered as this tactical genius. And you know, when you think of conflict in the world, he's one of the people that, you know, comes up as, I guess, like a keystone figure of that. And I'm just imagining a soldier during that time. Like, just imagine standing out on the fields in the grass, like you hear the sounds of the cannons firing, and you hear the other men next to you, or you hear some guys laughing, and there's like just normal human stuff that's happening between individuals. And then you just see Napoleon there, and he's like some guy. He's just some guy that's there. You know, he's just a dude who, and you know, he's probably surrounded by other important people or generals, and maybe they're planning something, but he's just a dude who's figuring something out. And so the soldier that is there, the eyewitness, has that nuance. Like they know, they understand the entire context, but everyone else is left with merely legend. It's just legend, you know, and that is just,
it's just a memory.
That becomes one-dimensional. It's a memory that gets colored with rose-tinted glasses, or vice versa, depending on what you believe.
Exactly. And that's where I'm very appreciative of my degree, is that we studied historiography. And I think that's one subject matter that everyone should look into. So historiography is the study of the interpretations of history, why we are interpreting history as such. And so one of my arguments was always, why is the greatest generation called the greatest generation, even though we saw the largest loss of life the world has ever seen within the span of 1900 to 1945? Why are they the greatest? Because of the largest amount of death? Is it because of the turmoil that was occurring at the time and they got through it? It's multifaceted. And so I think we still view World War II and even the Korean, it's like, even think of like the video games we play that are like Call of Duty, for instance. We've seen Call of Duties of World War I, World War II. We've seen,
dude, it's so weird you mentioned that. I just downloaded the OG Call of Duty 2 on my computer.
That's funny. But to my point is, like, we don't see one of Vietnam. Because
not that I'm aware of, yeah.
Exactly. And my point is this, is that...
Isn't Medal of Honor in Vietnam?
I don't think so. But if there is a game out there that is doing Vietnam, I'd be very surprised, for the simple fact that Vietnam for the United States at least, is a little bit of a controversial topic, a little bit, meaning it was the first time war was shown as war in the living room, meaning it was the first time they had live recordings of what was going on over there, and war is no longer viewed as a glorious, honorable thing, but just death.
Yeah.
And so that's where my point being is like, we should question why things are the way they are, not to a fact of like all the way to the argument of everything's a social construct, because to me that's not constructive, but to an extent of like, why are the things the way they are, and why is someone saying it in this way? Is it because their socialization, because of what they believe in? Is it because they aspire to have these groups of people remembered? Things like that. So
what's crazy now is you can now just watch that on YouTube. Like the other day I got recommended a channel that is vlogging the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, God.
I mean, not just walking around with a camera, but GoPro POV has a rifle and is in combat.
Jesus, dude.
Yeah, that's the thing now. It's not just on your living room TV, but it's like you could just set up a camera and do it yourself if you caught a flight, which is just wild.
Yeah, there's lots of violence that is occurring right now in our years, and it seems, I think for millennials, I can only speak to our generation because I am in it, but is really tired of the fighting, really just exhausted, because like we've been in a war since, I don't know, 2001 of some sort.
Well, we had Desert Storm before that,
and Desert Storm before, and so like we've always consistently been in conflict, and that's where it's kind of interesting, where have we always been in conflict? And it's like, it comes back to what's recorded, not recorded. I'm sure there was violence being occurred, but I think we just have now a more utilized communication systems to have it known at a click of a finger. And I think that's what kind of fuels that negativity per se.
TikTok really, I mean, we had a lot of details before, but after TikTok and what people could share there, it's like you can know everything.
Right. So to bring it back, because we're coming to that classic hour of time, I just want to kind of do a little summary of what we talked about today. First being that for goal setting, start off small and then snowball it. Sometimes it's helpful if you, if you use that goal with someone else that holds you accountable, kind of like how Obee Won in Rome do accountability in a sense.
I love how we're referred to now in the third person.
Or myself, I should say. And basically have an accountability partner. Start off small, and just be consistent. And if you don't achieve what you're seeking that day, really be kind to yourself. If you're going to take anything from this podcast, is just be kind to yourself, because it is exhausting not to be kind. It is exhausting to be kind. So might as well be kind and exhausted.
I want to add on a couple to those. So I think one of the things that helps me stay committed is to not think of motivation as the thing. So there are moments when we feel motivated to do stuff. And sometimes those are important catalysts for starting a new action. But inevitably things come up and things change. So you're not always going to feel motivated to stick to a goal or the steps for achieving a goal. So you have to have a contingency plan in place in order to do that. And I would say for me, and the easiest way to do it, because it's, if you get too in the weeds with it, it becomes overwhelming and then you don't want to do the routine either. But if you can develop a single keystone habit, then that is really key. So for me, I have two, and if I don't do one, I do the other. And if I do the other, I can do both, which is really great. So my number one keystone habit is I go to bed at 8:30. No questions asked, no compromises, unless there are extenuating circumstances where I'm out or I'm, maybe I'm on a film set and I'm working, then yeah, I'm going to be out past 8:30. But if I'm at home and work can wait till tomorrow, it's waiting till tomorrow. And so I'm getting ready for bed by 8:30. That's the first one. The second one is 8 glasses of water a day. So if I don't get up at 5 a.m. or if I don't stick to my primary keystone habit, I'm drinking my damn water. So I'm drinking my water and just correcting everything else I can.
So what I'm hearing is drink the water.
Yeah. Drink the water. If
you're going to do anything and learn anything from this segment of our podcast, drink water.
And I want to be clear because, if beforehand I would have said, you need to go to bed, you need to drink the water, you need to eat, you need to exercise. But as soon as we do that, that's like a full-time job for some people. Okay. So if you can't do everything, just do one of them every day. Like if you can just do one, make it that easy, then you are setting yourself up. Like you're already ahead of so many people if you can just do that. Building routines around a goal is essential. After my dad passed away, that was so talking about motivation. The motivation was a really tragic event had happened in my life, and suddenly I was like, okay, I'm gonna be in a movie. Right. My goal was I'm going to be in a movie and I'm going to get my acting career sorted. So the motivation lasted for a little while. In fact, it lasted for, I would say, over a year. But the routine is what kept me going. And at the time, my routine was every night when I would get on my computer to submit, I would aim for 10 roles. I had to submit for 10 films. And before or after the session of submitting, there's a very specific video I would watch. It was the 2015 NXL Paintball Championship. And the music that the editor used, there's the dyslexia, the music that the editor used, the shots that they used, the decision to use slow-mo in one point or another, the energy from that video, I would just take it in and I would go, okay, it's back to work. Every night I would watch that same video and I would submit for those roles. And eventually it's going to be a podcast in and of itself, but eventually I did book my first movie, which was a huge accomplishment.
That's on the list.
It is definitely on the list. So I would say the keystone habits are key. If you can just do one, then that's fantastic. And, stay committed. Like right now, one of my big goals is traveling to India. And so the past 12 or 13 days, I'm on a 12-day streak of learning Hindi. So I'm barely starting to put sentences and sounds together, which is really cool. I enjoy it a lot.
That's amazing. Alrighty, folks. That's all I think we got. Thank you for listening, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Yep. Thank you so much. We'll talk again soon.